So, as some of you may have heard, Jehovah's Witnesses just received new light in regards to blood transfusions, and the implications are huge. In March 2026, Watchtower released this governing body update, hosted by Garrett Lush, the oldest serving member of the governing body. The episode starts with some updates regarding the construction of the new Italy branch and some relief work done in recently affected areas, but we're gonna focus on the latter part of the video because that's when the update takes place. And please excuse me for my rough voice. I'm getting out of a fever, but you know the duty calls. So let's begin. So we might need a bit of context before we watch. To establish the current doctrine as of 2026, Jehovah's Witnesses are not allowed to accept blood transfusions or donate blood. This prohibition, which started to be enforced in 1961, is derived mostly from two Bible texts. The first is Leviticus 17:14, which prohibited the ancient Israelites from eating blood. Whenever they slaughtered an animal, they had to spill the blood onto the ground, as a show of respect to God. These were dietary guidelines for the Jewish people, just like the prohibition on eating pork or shellfish. The early Christians seem to have adopted this practice. In Acts 15:20, the elders in Jerusalem call for all Christians to abstain from what is strangled and from blood, which is a reference to the Mosaic law, a call to abstain from consuming blood. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses looked at this passage, which was clearly a dietary law, and applied it to all sorts of blood consumption, including blood transfusions. They argue that since blood represents life, blood itself is sacred, and consuming it in any way is a great sin against the Creator. As far as I know, Jehovah's Witnesses are the only Christian sect that holds to this interpretation, for not even the most strict Jewish sects command their members to abstain from blood transfusions. Now, the command might seem simple enough, right? Abstain from all blood. But in practice, it gets really messy. By blood, they mean either whole blood or the four main components of blood, which is white blood cells, red blood cells, plasma, and platelets. All of those are forbidden. However, JWs are free to decide if they will accept fractions from those four main components. For example, from red blood cells, you can derive hemoglobin and hemin, and JWs are allowed to take those. Those are left as a conscience matter. So, why are some fractions of blood acceptable while some aren't? Well, because the Watchtower said so. Don't question it. So that's the current doctrine as of 2026, right? Now let's see how Garrett Lush muddies the waters even more.
Jehovah God is the life giver, and He wants us to respect the gift of life. One way we show respect for life is by obeying His commands concerning blood. Jehovah gave Noah and his descendants the timeless command, only flesh with its life, its blood, you must not eat. He likewise directed Christians to abstain from what is strangled and from blood. As Jehovah's Witnesses, we conscientiously obey this command today. It also affects the decisions we make about medical treatment involving blood. When making decisions about blood, we have also been guided over the years by what the Mosaic law stated at Leviticus 17, verse 13. If one of the Israelites or some foreigner who is residing in your midst is hunting and catches a wild animal or a bird that may be eaten, he must pour its blood out and cover it with dust. However, is that law binding on Christians? The simple answer is no. Christians are not under the command that blood be poured out and covered with dust.
Mind you, Jehovah's Witnesses have known this since the beginning. They know that they're no longer under the Mosaic law. That's why they don't keep Jewish dietary guidelines or the Sabbath. But that doesn't stop the Watchtower from cherry-picking verses from the Old Testament to denounce stuff that they don't approve of, like homosexuality, tattoos, birthdays, and blood transfusions.
Furthermore, the Bible does not comment on the use of a person's own blood in medical and surgical care.
You know what other thing the Bible never comments on? The use of any type of blood in medical and surgical care. And don't be fooled, transfusions using your own blood have been absolutely prohibited in this religion until now. In fact, in their latest study manual, Enjoy Life Forever, we get this clear instruction. There are medical procedures that make use of a patient's own blood. Some of these, such as a person donating blood or having his own blood stored in advance of surgery, are not acceptable for Christians. There it is, it's clear as day. And as of March 20, 2026, they still haven't updated the guidelines in the book. Also, in the medical directive card that JWs are expected to carry around with them in case of an emergency, it explicitly says, I refuse to pre donate and store my blood for later infusion. Yes, guys, Jehovah's Witnesses would rather die than accept a blood transfusion. Now, listen very carefully to what Garrett Lush is about to say because his language is very intentionally deceptive.
Regarding the use of one's own blood, our position has been, as is stated in the October 15, 2000 issue of the Watchtower, there it says, a Christian must decide for himself how his own blood will be handled in the course of a surgical procedure, medical test, or current therapy. For that reason, many Christians accept simple procedures such as blood tests, as well as more complicated procedures involving their own blood, such as the use of heart-lung machines, cell salvage devices, and kidney dialysis treatments. However, the list of treatment options continues to grow.
So, going by what we just heard, it would appear that JWs have always had the liberty to choose what they do with their own blood. But I actually looked up the article that he was referring to, and guess what it says? I quote, occasionally, a doctor will urge a patient to deposit his own blood weeks before surgery, so that if the need arises, he could transfuse the patient with his own stored blood. However, such collecting, storing, and transfusing of blood directly contradicts what is said in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Blood is not to be stored, it is to be poured out, returned to God, as it were. Granted, the Mosaic law is not enforced now. Nevertheless, Jehovah's Witnesses respect the principles God included in it, and they are determined to abstain from blood. Hence, we do not donate blood, nor do we store for transfusion our blood that should be poured out. That practice conflicts with God's law. So what do you know? In the article that Lush is quoting, we get a clear prohibition on storing your own blood. It's against God's commands. So by quote mining this article, Lush is being intentionally deceptive, giving the appearance that JWs have always had the freedom to store their own blood, which is not the case. It was completely off limits. If the elders catch you doing it, you would be disfellowshipped. This guy is just straight up lying to us. Garrett, I thought Satan was the father of the lie.
Therefore, after much prayer and consideration of the Scriptures, the governing body has decided to clarify our position on the use of a patient's own blood in medical and surgical care. The clarification is this. Each Christian must decide for himself how his own blood will be used in all medical and surgical care. This includes whether to allow his own blood to be removed, stored, and then given back to him. What does this mean? Some Christians may decide that they would allow their blood to be stored and then be given back to them. Others may object. Each Christian must make his personal decision on all matters involving the use of his own blood with regard to medical or surgical care.
Let's be clear. This is not a clarification. It's a contradiction. A complete reversal. A clarification would clear up any vagueness surrounding the original rule. But there was no vagueness. Christians were not allowed to store their own blood. Period. By calling it a clarification, Lush refuses to admit that they were wrong. Oh, but remember, the governing body has no need to apologize for any doctrinal mistakes. They already told us.
Well, knowing this, then, we are not embarrassed about adjustments that are made, nor is an apology needed for not getting it exactly right previously. The governing body is neither inspired nor infallible.
In review, Christians are not under the Mosaic law. However, we obey the apostolic command to abstain from blood. Furthermore, the Bible does not comment on the use of a person's own blood in medical and surgical care. Therefore, like other choices about health care, each Christian must make his own decision about the use of his own blood in all medical and surgical care.
You know, I wish I could be this nonchalant after screwing up the lives of thousands of people. Countless lives have been lost to this atrocious blood doctrine, and this grandpa has zero remorse, just sitting there lying to us. Now, this might seem like a small, insignificant change at first. Storing your own blood will be useful if you have a surgery planned, but what happens if, God forbid, you have an accident in a foreign country or even in an area far from your hospital? What happens then? You're screwed. The point of blood transfusions is that you need them in an emergency, and you never know when there's gonna be an emergency. Also, as some people on Reddit have already pointed out, blood doesn't have a very long lifespan, so you would have to be constantly supplying your local bank in case anything goes wrong. Yes, it's a positive change, it's a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. We need a complete lift on the blood prohibition, like yesterday. And the most frustrating part is that the governing body could lift it at any moment. They have the power to do so. They have already stated that Christians are not subject to the Mosaic law. So the only thing they would need is to clarify that blood transfusions do not fall under the prohibition found in Acts 15. Which is obvious. That command was a dietary guideline brought over from Judaism. Garrett already admitted that the Bible does not comment on the use of your own blood, which also extends to any type of blood. The Bible doesn't comment on it because blood transfusions did not exist in the first century. So tell me, what makes storing your own blood acceptable while receiving someone else's blood forbidden? The lines that they draw around these prohibitions are always so arbitrary. I really hope this wakes a lot of people up. I'm sure most Jehovah's Witnesses would just accept these changes without batting an eye, especially if it has never affected them. But maybe some members who have lost a family member to this policy can finally start to see through the crack. They can finally start to see that the governing body are just a bunch of frauds. Now, the question remains, why the change? Why start chipping away at a decades old doctrine? My guess is that this was done for legal reasons. That way they can say to the courts, see, JWs are allowed to accept life-saving medical procedures as long as it involves your own blood, and that posture might save them from some legal trouble. But hey, if you have a better theory, please let me know in the comments below. It could also be that their lawyers have advised them that they need to drop the blood prohibition, but they decided to just do it in stages, so a bit of damage control. That could also be an option. I don't know. Now, I would like to share some reactions from the XJW community because this is a very emotional topic for some people, and rightfully so. Let's read some comments. Fader Underground says, if JWs were really able to use their brain instead of just playing follow the leader, this update could logically dismantle the entire blood doctrine. It undermines the reasoning behind the doctrine in the first place. It's based on a principle of the Mosaic law that once blood leaves the body, it belongs to God. In short, if a person's own blood no longer belongs to God after it leaves the body, then someone else's doesn't either. So logically, why couldn't it also be used for the use of saving a life? This idea that JWs can now use their own blood but not someone else's has no scriptural support. If blood is just blood after it leaves the body, then what does it matter if it's a person's own blood or not? Hey man, I couldn't have said it any better myself. Tasty Gade says, I feel sick to my stomach. I am literally crying in the tram now as I text. How dare they? 5 years ago, I had a C-section. My anesthesiologist begged me to reserve my own blood. My general practitioner pumped me to my eyeball with iron infusion to make sure I won't bleed out. Thankfully, all went well, but what if they hadn't? I feel so angry I want to cry and scream and break something. Yeah, it's a disaster. A huge ass says, told my mom about this. She claimed it's always been a personal choice, trying to gaslight me. If it's always been a personal choice, then why do they need to clarify, change the rule now? In response, she said it was never a rule. Yep, that's exactly what's gonna happen. The indoctrination in this religion runs so deep that JWs will gaslight themselves instead of doing a bit of research. They did the exact same thing after the governing body update, which allowed men to have beards, claiming it was never a rule in the first place. It's complete bollocks. No Joke says, it's funny that he avoids using the word transfusion. He rather says the stored blood can be given back. Really? You know, I hadn't noticed that before, but yes, their language is very intentional. They are weasels of the highest degree. Surround C says, they literally used out of context scriptures and an out of context quote from an old article to just make up more rubbish. It's ridiculous. Now, for real, man, these guys should be professional surgeons the way they splice up old text to make up their Frankenstein doctrines. I really hope JWs have the common sense to look up the articles that they're quoting. Good to have help says, just think of the people who allowed their child to die. Unimaginable. Guys, as much as we joke around about Watchtower lifting the restrictions on beards, toasting, and dress pants for ladies, some of these prohibitions are extremely serious. The shunning and blood policies have taken countless lives, and they will continue to do so until the governing body lifts them completely. So, we can't stop calling out their tyrannical rules because they're still affecting millions of people, including our families. So try to gaslight us all you want, Garrett Lush, because we have the receipts. We have the old light, proof that you are not guided by the Holy Spirit. You are just a bunch of aging old men with delusions of grandeur, and we're gonna do our best to make sure that everyone knows it.
We love you all very much.
Ah, fuck you!
Guys, as always, I thank you for watching. Now, I would love to hear from you. Please tell me about your experience with the blood prohibition. How have your PIMI relatives reacted to this new light? Do you think Watchtower will one day lift the blood prohibition entirely? Let me know in the comments below. If you would like to support my work, please head on over to Patreon or become a channel member. It's only $1 a month and you gain early access to all my videos. Thank you so much. Take it easy, have a wonderful day, and stay away from the tower.